the river on a journey through the years, and we are the laughter, sorrow and the tears from brooks and byways. The waters now have grown, guide us on our way, lead us home. River round the bend, guide us till the end. River round the bend, lead us home. River round the bend, guide us till the end. River round the bend, lead us home.
As humans, we inevitably experience harm. We feel hurt, we get hurt, and we hurt others. We free ourselves from this experience not by imagining we can escape harm, but knowing we can heal it, moving from wound to scar, and then learning to love the scars. This, of course, can be the work of a lifetime. Luckily, I have long loved scars. When I was 4, I accidentally cut my left eye. As a result, a small scar formed underneath it, and inside my eye was permanently dilated with a keyhole in it. After I had the eye removed at 21, a photographer I knew told me she wanted to record people's scars, so I asked her to photograph me with my empty socket. It may be at 21 I looked youthful, even radiant, but that one-eyed image of myself is my favorite photo. In fact, it's the only picture of me where the subject feels beautiful. From childhood, I loved my left eye, even though I lost sight in it early on, because it embodied strength. That scarred part of me told a story of a brave 4-year-old and the mother who never left her side, except for that long gurney ride to the operating room where I wailed for her and experienced a feeling of abandonment for the first time, full of utter terror and bewilderment that my cries did not bring her back to my side. My mother slept next to me for a week in that hospital and then drove me every morning for the next 21 days to the ophthalmologist so he could change the dressing and check the wound. And despite the metal patch that covered my eye, the early morning car ride heading east proved brutal. My mother tried to soothe me, my head tucked in her lap as I lay across the front seat. Later, that same year, I asked her to call me son because I knew in my small body a terrible mistake had been made in utero. I was supposed to be born a boy like my older brother. I remember my deflation, hearing her say she would not call me son because I was the little girl she had longed for. One wound she knew how to tend. The other, she did not.
We are the stories, the ones that come with us to dwell. We are the music, all the songs we've loved so well, the hopes we share, the love of every friend we've known. Guide us on our way, lead us home. River round the bend, guide us till the end. River round the bend, lead us home. River round the bend, guide us till the end. River round the bend, lead us home.
We all have our wounds. Unattended or ignored, they fester. When we acknowledge them, acknowledging them as thoroughly and gently as the doctor checking my injured eye, we seed redemption. How we tell the story of an injury can transform it. When we give voice to trauma as neither victim nor villain, choosing to write ourselves as lovable, worthy, and accountable, healing begins. It is, however, an enduring process. I adjusted to the scorch of sunlight when it hit my permanently dilated left eye, squeezing my eyelid shut and letting a hank of hair cover that side of my face. A carapace of sorts, protecting my eye, perhaps shielding me from the invisibility of my boyness, so evident inside me. Much as I wanted to emerge from that shell, my body knew the blinding pain of exposure. At age 6, I referred to my non-dominant right hand as my girl hand because it was clumsy. And when a tiny wart appeared on the knuckle, I slapped my left hand, punishing it for the additional ignominy of ugliness. I kept emulating my brother, hoping the errancy of my femaleness would be redeemed. And when he, the only boy I could imagine loving, disappeared at age 14 to attend prep school the year I was 9, a chasm opened. He left me alone with our mother and a mysterious younger sister who screamed daily for hours, even though she did not speak or walk until age 2. Our father came home later and less often. As my brother, the bulwark against my loneliness, traveled out of sight, touching back down 4 years later when he graduated after our parents had divorced. Like a blinded sibling reaching for the comforting braille of his body, I sought his company throughout the summer of his return. August 20th, he died in a fiery wreck at 4 a.m, his sports car colliding with a tree. I learned later, the woman inside the house where he crashed was awake at the window nursing a newborn. So often I have thought of her, witnessing that, wondering what story she might have told. After my brother's death, I entered a state of suspended animation, unable to find a place to hunker down in my grief. I watched and waited for my maleness to visibly emerge, certain it would descend like recalcitrant testicles. But at 13, as my relatively androgynous child body inched toward femaleness, the only thing I knew about being female was that meant being sexual with boys. Those were the only stories I knew, so the wound widened around the lack of better ones and abscessed over unexpressed grief. I betrayed myself with boys nothing like my inner one, no tenderness in them as they pressed themselves into places so tender in me. Redemption happens when we acknowledge the true nature of the hurt we experience, when we name the harm, tell the story, notice the nuances, lean deep into the interstitial silence, listening for what gets revealed in what remains unsaid. blooms in the respite of deep breaths, giving space to exhale grief, anger, emptiness, bewilderment, and pain, the disappointment of disappearance and departure. When we relinquish blame, shame, and the lingering patter of the inner critic, quick to pronounce fault, choosing instead to hold ourselves in compassionate embrace with tenderness, we can step back enough to see the fullness of each unfolding story. The recognition that my brother's leave-taking and my father's, and decades later someone else I fiercely loved, reflected their journey, not my desirability or worth, freed me from a lifelong narrative of abandonment, shaping a new story of redemption. Recently, my 91-year-old mother shared a book her librarian friend had chosen for her, Love Lives Here, a story of thriving in a transgender family. At lunch, she apologized for not recognizing the wound and for the harm she caused denying my request at age 4. Her voice cracked, her eyes welled. The other day, I heard you describe yourself as a 61-year-old woman who dresses like a 10-year-old boy. It's an accurate descriptor. I identify as female. I am finally at home in my body, and most of the time, that's how I dress. I still carry the carefreeness of the boyhood I imagined for myself. I wonder if what you really want is just to be able to be Leaf. Yes, the wounds turn to scars as the story changes. I redeem myself from the hurt I've experienced by freeing myself from feeling victimized, somehow deserving of the harm or deliberately targeted for it. Revising the story doesn't deny the grief, it honors the depth of it. The leave-taking that occasioned my loss wasn't about me any more than a tornado blowing through. Life happens. We form emotional attachments and desire proximity. When someone leaves us or is forced to, it disrupts the proximal connection, and that often hurts. It might end physical intimacy, and that loss is real. What disappears does not erase what existed. I free myself from harm when I realize the energy of connection remains in the cosmos, just as the essence of who we are and the energy of our bodies releases into the atmosphere upon death. Redemption happens when I remember that. Last year, during a conversation about the 3 decades I attended 12-step meetings, the person asked what I am recovering from. I responded, the human condition. Being human was the cause of the half-dozen drinks and relationships I picked up to quell the feelings of insecurity and unworthiness. I redeem myself from the harm I caused or occasioned by being responsible, traveling the distance from intention to impact. Redemption happens through a process of accountability, acknowledging the effects of our behavior and asking what needs arise as a result. We must address those needs to repair the harm we caused and ensure we won't repeat it by healing the harm we carry within. Redemption happens when we free ourselves and others from the static roles of victim and victimizer. It is only in an uncondemned state that any of us can change. When we recognize the complexity of each person who appears in our story, acknowledging that their story is bigger than the role they play in ours, then all of our stories continue to unfold. Redemption happens when no one is condemned to stasis, the impossibility of revision. Redemption happens when we craft the story we need to reclaim ourselves. For much of my life, I turned from myself and from a sense of belonging. Like Cain, I set off to wander in the wilderness, full of remorse, laden with shame. A childhood that felt like my body betrayed me had more to do with the collective stories that betray so many of our truths. Toni Morrison wrote her first novel, The Bluest Eye, because she said it was the book she needed to read, and no one else had written it. I imagine vocation arises that way for many of us, meeting a need so essential within ourselves that serves the world as well. For me, it's redemption, whether it's writing, teaching, preaching, circle keeping, or just providing warm accompaniment. It's all an invitation to move from wound to scar, from constraint to release, from leave-taking to letting go, from exile to belonging. Redemption happens when the unfolding of our stories lets every part of us breathe, exposing our fullness, leaving no corners for shame to gather or harm to accrue. Wholeness is where healing happens, creativity flows, and the spirit enlivens. Redemption invites us to inhabit the human condition in lieu of perpetually having to recover from it.
We are forgiveness, the light that falls from heaven's gates, and we seek the healing for scars so long encased. Grant us the courage, the grace that can atone. Guide us on our way, lead us home. River round the bend, guide us till the end. River round the bend, lead us home. River round the bend, guide us till the end. River round the bend, lead us home. River round the bend, lead us home.